Hi friends, thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach Podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach Podcast. Today, I get to bring back my friend and fellow concussion nerd, Jack Fonderwhite. This is our second interview together, so go and listen to episode 104 to hear our last conversation about his electroacupuncture business and how he helps people with concussions using this special acupuncture technique, as well as other strategies and techniques that he's picked up along the way. I'm going to give you a little bio intro to Jack here. He's the creator of Peak Mind, a novel electroacupuncture approach to neurostimulation. Jack is a provider for some of Hawaii's top talent, including UFC's BMF champion and former featherweight champion Max Holloway. First introduced to acupuncture and herbal medicine in Hiroshima, Japan, Jack has combined his experience from years of competing in kickboxing, marathons, and touch rugby with the clinical expertise gained from nearly a decade of working with professional athletes to build an innovative practice called Jackupuncture. Blends traditional tools with cutting-edge technology to help elite performers get the best out of themselves while competing on the world stage in sport and business. With a brain-first approach to care and performance, Jack specializes in helping present and former athletes elevate their brain's ability to perform at its best in sport, work, school, and life. Having witnessed the impact of unaddressed youth sports concussions on adult patients, Jack has developed a comprehensive program for past and present youth athletes to receive the care and education necessary to ensure everyone can enjoy the benefits of sport without compromising their long-term health, happiness, and success. Thanks so much for being back here with us again, Jack. This is going to be a good conversation.
Thanks for having me, Bethany. It's great to see you again. Good chat.
Yay! Yes, it is good. I love the connections that are out here in this concussion world. There's good people trying to help people all over the place. So let's just catch up for a little bit. I'd love to hear any updates since our last conversation, which was a while ago. Hold on, let me actually look really quick. It was back in, I'm looking at when it was published. And July of 2025. So it's been a year.
Oh, no kidding. Wow,
Yeah.
look at that. What great timing.
I know, right? Crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Tell me any updates you want us to know about Jackupuncture, where you're at, what you're doing, all the things.
Some big milestones for me. We were talking about it. I've got the trademarks filed for Jackupuncture and Peak Mind, which is really cool. One as the modality and approach in acupuncture, and the other is the way trademarks works is you're supposed to trademark each specific way the mark is used.
Oh, interesting.
So because the goal is to be teaching Peak Mind and to give other people outside of Hawaii access to this via other providers is to train those providers. So we filed a trademark for the education and teaching of Peak Mind. So that's some big stuff that was recently done last week with some lawyers. We'll be filing it in a few other countries probably as well as we get providers there.
Awesome.
So, big steps. We have a local nonprofit that will be launched this year that is going to be collecting grants and donations to fund concussion care for concussed youth athletes. Because I've seen so many adults come in with, decades-long symptoms, these persistent concussion symptoms they don't even realize are connected to their history in sport. I've been trying to really spearhead the creation of something, whether it be a nonprofit or programs here at Jackupuncture that allow us to get access to the level of care that these youth athletes need while they're still youth, as opposed to allowing them to be concussed, let that go unaddressed, and allow it to, filter into their adult lives and impact them until they finally meet a concussion nerd or a jackupuncturist or a peak mind provider or whatever, right? Until that connection is made, those people tend to not thrive and do as well in life. They suffer, their performance suffers, and we're looking to stop that before it really becomes a thing. So we have that nonprofit that should be launching in a few months here, I think. Some really big, cool things that have been like some of the goals for myself as a provider and just as a person who went through those experiences, right? As a youth athlete, as an adult athlete, and as a business owner and a clinic provider. So
Yeah.
yeah, very cool stuff.
I love it. And I want to know if you would speak to this for a second. Why? Like, why are you doing all of this? This is a lot to be putting out there and beautiful things that you're making happen. What's driving all of that for you?
I'm glad you asked, honestly, because I thought to myself yesterday, why? Like, geez, it's a huge undertaking. I'm one single person. My wife helps. She does a lot of support in the background as well as some in the clinic. So I don't want to say I'm a single person here, but it's a lot of work, right, for a small operation like that. But the reason is because it is such a huge need. If I didn't have the personal experience with it, the impact of unaddressed concussions, I wouldn't even know that there was a problem. I wouldn't be spotting it in my patients. So I'm writing a book right now too, like speaking of all the things I'm doing, right? To kind of, chronicle the stages I went through as a individual, then as a patient and an athlete, and then as a provider, and what's led me to this. And it's just that I can look back at my life now with the education I have and the clinical experience I have and say, there were a lot of problems that I probably could have avoided, and some heights, some greater heights I probably could have even reached, and people in my family could have reached, my previous patients could have reached, such that it seems to me as though it would be almost unfair if something like this didn't exist for patients and youth in particular to get help, because all they're trying to do is compete in sport for everyone at every stage of life, right? In every way that we exist and experience life as humans, activity and play and sport fill our cups and help us thrive biologically and psychologically and everything else. So for this particular and pernicious injury to go unaddressed and go overlooked, in the end impacts everyone and our entire society. And that's the realization I came to when I first fixed my brain and realized, whoa, like how many of us are walking around like I was
Mm.
and feel like we're doing okay, and we're totally not.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. I so love this. I love that you've taken this like hard thing that you've gone through. You've seen like you've gotten the help, you've figured out how to help others, and then you're just using that to continue the goodness into the world. I appreciate what you're doing and the passion that you do it with. I know that you really, really care about this. And as a fellow entrepreneur in this space, I can definitely sympathize with the like ups and downs. Like, why am I doing this again? Oh, right. Then you talk to a patient and you're like, this is why I'm doing it. This is like,
Yeah.
it's all worth it. But yeah, it is an up and down journey. So thank you for what you're doing. And I believe that we covered pretty well, tell me if I'm wrong, your story and your journey of getting through, like learning it about it and finding what helped and then creating what you're creating in our last conversation. Is there anything that you want to make sure that we talk about from that experience?
We have like the origin story of me as a provider within the concussion field and Peak Mind itself, right? That now we've developed. I guess the only other thing to add to that is we're continuing to evolve that program of Peak Mind. It's now a pretty solid 4-month program where we're treating people and continue to support them. And I'm building out a 12-month curriculum as well for people who want to like extend that, dive into the lifestyle aspects, because I mean, we're sitting here talking about sports and youth athletes and combat sports because that's the topic, but this is something that impacts everyone. And the things that we need to do for athlete brains and concussed brains is the same thing that needs to be done for all of us who want to make sure that we are, avoiding or slowing down the potentially inevitable decline of our cognitive longevity and our ability to feel and live well. So building that out too.
Love it.
Yeah.
So awesome. And I appreciate the point you said earlier as well about how it impacts society in general. Like, I think, like you said, there are so many people out there who are probably going through life not realizing that they are living at a decreased capacity because of past head injuries, and that there is help for that, and to just try to like make a difference. It's important work. So yeah, thanks for what you're doing. And I'm excited about your book. That's cool to hear that you're writing one of those as well. Very cool. So tell us a little bit more what kind of started this particular podcast episode. Was I have a client that I'm working with who got his injury doing, I believe it was kickboxing, but he's very interested in MMA, mixed martial arts, for those listening. And he really wants to get back to it, but this concussion has, rocked his world as they do. And he's working on getting back. But you're my connection with that world in this space of healing from it as well. And I just was interested in hearing your thoughts on if there's any difference in concussions with people who are having them from MMA versus other types of injuries. I don't know if there is. I would be surprised if there is, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts and like kind of what you've seen in the world of MMA and concussions, and we'll just kind of explore from there. So,
it's one thing I think is one of the main challenges I think that we face when it comes to helping athletes in combat sports in particular is the fact that there's not as much data on those particular sports, especially when it comes to the return to sport aspect. We are, as providers for combat sports athletes, we're probably mostly following the playbook of every sport where, hey, we make sure that we're hitting certain benchmarks. We have the objective data to show that we are performing around our baseline again. We put you through some exertion tests. We put you through some, no touch, then some light touch. And, we go through all the correct stages to make sure we're getting them back to the place where they can perform safely within their sport. But there are, I think, a lot of variables within this particular realm of sports and athletics that require a different approach, more intentional and informed approach. And we don't have the information to be informed on it as much as I think we should. There's a lot more when it comes to orthopedic injuries, for example, because the joint is the joint. The rupture is the rupture. We know what the healing timeline looks like. We know what the procedures and approaches would be. But when it comes to the brain, first of all, we know that's going to be unique to every individual, how it performs and what its baseline looked like. But within combat sports, if you're sparring, if you're training, you're likely receiving or on the end of the types of blows that are likely to be concussing you without you having any severe symptoms. So we are dealing with a population and an athlete who has a greater regular exposure, I think, to concussive forces, much less likely to be aware of it and its impact. And we don't have the data to say what exactly should be done for combat sports, because there is, from my understanding and what I have been exposed to in my reading and research and the people within the space that I follow, there are different thoughts on whether or not sub-concussive impacts are really a category or a thing, technically. If, there's evidence showing that these types of sub-concussive impacts, if you ascribe to them, lead to a greater prevalence or likelihood of CTE developing. Then you have people and studies that show, hey, within the general population, whether or not these people have played in sports, we're seeing the same prevalence or percentages of CTE no matter the sport experience. So there's a lot of challenges when you're talking about a type of sport whose practice and like literal just training and practice itself exposes us to a much higher degree of concussion exposure. Not just that, you can't succeed in the sport without exposing yourself to those problems outside of the competition. And the competition, the bout, the fight is the only place where the concussion occurrence is measured. So we have patients who are unaware of it. We have an entire realm of sport that is only aware of it and only measures it when it is competition, when it is a sanctioned bout. You have smokers in gyms, which means, it's informal competition, maybe gym against gym or just fighters within the same gym competing against each other as one additional layer of exposure for concussion that gets completely unmeasured. So returning combat sports athletes to competition, if we're going to do it the same way we try to do it for other sports, is an extremely unique and novel challenge, I think, that no one has fully attempted. And even in my small clinic, while I'm trying to do it, it presents unique challenges because of the nature of the sport.
Yeah, the sport itself is, I mean, I was talking to somebody, I don't remember who said this, but they were like, the boxing specifically is, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but tell me, is like the only sport where the actual intention is to knock somebody out and like make them unconscious. So like, but in all of these combat sports, like you're saying, it's very aggressive. It's the point of it is to injure the other person. And so it does seem like a particularly important realm in which to make sure that the person is operating at top level before they jump back in the ring. What kind of research would you like to see be done, or what do you think needs to happen in this space to get better clarity about these topics and when people can come back?
That's a good question. Jeez Louise. Well, I'm probably not the best person to ask for that. I'll give my thoughts and they can be added on by others. We would want baseline measurements of the athletes as they start. Because I've worked with boxers who are like 6 years old, 8 years old, 11 years old, and they have 10, 20 bouts already. We have no idea where that young brain stood before it started taking on this punishment. And in a lot of those fights, they're not allowed to punch the head yet, the younger ones. So it's a lot of body blows. But, kids
Can
kids
still
play
get
around.
concussions from that.
Yes, you can still get concussions from that. Two, kids play around outside. So if they're trained to, spar and compete, they're probably catching some shots to the head or throwing themselves as a way of preparing for when they're allowed to. So one thing is understanding what the baseline for the athletes as they enter the sport, because then we could compare that to other sports in general. We have through high school, we already have, and middle schools, I think a lot of middle schools in the US, we're already collecting that baseline data through the schools themselves now, right? They have like an app or a browser-based program they use that catches the baseline for their in-season sport. And if there's a concussion, they get checked. But that's not happening for combat sports athletes at all. This is not a sport that is going through the schools, except for maybe in Hawaii, judo. We have judo, which is a combat sport similar to wrestling, but a lot more throws. So I would imagine there's a bit higher concussion rate there, or, more exposure to it. So we would have a little bit of data on combat sports youth through that perspective, but there's a lot of other combat sports that kids are joining that there's no data on whatsoever, and they become the adults. They often will become the more active adults, the potential legends of their sport, but we have no idea what the trajectory of their brain, I think, where we should be starting. It's a huge ask, but there are bodies that sanction these sports. There are bodies that federations and other things that promote them, market them, support the schools and the tournaments and their rise into the Olympics as an Olympic sport. And so I think if the right people hear it and understand what it means, there could be programs that start to educate the families who are bringing their children into these sports that they love and capturing that data from the get-go. I think that'd be a huge start to it.
Yeah. And just curious if people are listening to this and like, okay, my kid wants to do this, what kind of, when you say baseline measurements, what should people be getting tested and measured on?
Well, I know you probably know yourself, but when it comes to combat sports, I think we have to be a bit more in the weeds and detailed than we might normally be. So, there are several apps that are great in assessing for cognition, different domains of cognition and reaction time, as well as capturing balance. I think that's just the start of where combat sports needs to be, because we need to understand all those systems that could be affected by concussion, where they stand at the beginning. Honestly, that's true of all sports, I would argue, right? If a concussion in any sport is going to lead to an impact on some of these systems, we should know all those systems, how they're performing before the concussion. So it would be, I would add into the balance and cognitive domain aspects and reaction time. It's going to be a deeper dive into the systems that impact the balance, like the proprioceptive systems, the cervical spine, which is part of the proprioceptive system to some degree, your visual systems, your vestibular system, the 7 systems we're talking about. Autonomics should be part of that. I know there are at least one company that's trying to build out an app that is more inclusive of these things, but it's kind of gated behind the particular provider or network. So we need something of that ilk that is widely accessible, cheap, easy to use, and, marketed to this entire world of combat sports, because it is boxing, it's taekwondo, kickboxing, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, judo. It's all these things. And when it comes to MMA, it's some mix of them. Even though MMA gets kind of trained almost as though it's its own sport now, everyone comes to it with a background in 1 or 2 combat sports and then kind of builds out their entire skill set to compete within the MMA rule set. So all of them need that level and degree of detail on their performance, which I think they would benefit from whether or not they're concussed, because then we have ideas of how can you improve? How can you remain safer in sport? How can you be more successful? But it has to start first.
Yeah, right. We need to have that as an option. Okay, but I think these are great ideas. So if anybody is out there listening and wants to do this, make it happen, please let us know. But no, I agree. These are really important things. And something that comes up a lot just in working with clients is that, even if they go and get testing done post-concussion, there isn't the baseline to compare it to, which can lead to challenges even within the medical system of people understanding and believing that concussion is impacting the person, right? So there's it's the baseline thing makes a big difference and is important. So I appreciate you bringing that point up and encourage people, parents, if you're listening, your kiddo wants to get into this, get some baseline testing done from a concussion provider just to see where they're at, how they're doing, and that you'll have something to compare to down the road if necessary.
And if I could hop in there, I think because while the baseline is so important, I think some of the challenges and obstacles I mentioned earlier, they add to the challenge of the baseline itself, because if we don't get them before they're already competing and taking on those concussions, we're just taking a snapshot of what their baseline is at the point in time after whatever concussions they may have experienced, whatever trauma they've already incurred. And these combat sports, there's no season to it. This is annual. This is year long. You're always competing. You're always training. You always have to be ready to take on a fight. Even when I retired from fighting, I told myself I will always try to stay within a 2 or 3 month window of being able to get back into competition. Like, I want to stay at that level of readiness for my cardiovascular system, my strength, my skills. So for years after no longer fighting competitively, I still trained as though I was going to get back into the ring if I had to, because there's no start time. You're always on, and you have to always be ready to be on. So when it comes to your patient, for example, like, well, how do we turn them? You're going to have to work with that individual and understand what are their goals and what are their needs, and just do the best you can to support their brain's ability to recover, educate them on what needs to get done to make sure that can happen the best that it can, and accept the fact that in combat sports, we're usually talking about a breed of human and person that is, they're a grinder. They're gonna push through a lot. It only because, at the very least, if nothing else, it behooves them to be of that ilk. It is required of them in their sport to be able to push through pain and to say, oh, whatever, I'm still going to get one back and I'm still going to win this. I'm still going to knock them out, or I'm still going to finish this in some fashion. that's the kind of person that's going to push through symptoms when they're supposed to be chilling at that point if they're on
right.
their return to sport protocol or something like that, right? So there's a lot to those individuals and to their sport because it is year long. You have to be able to just go, go, go. There's no
So
stop.
how do you how do you deal with that with your patients? Like, how do you encourage them to take seriously the rest that they need to take in order to get the healing that they need in order to get back to their sport? What do you tell them?
While I try to avoid nocebos, I do try to use anecdotes of the cases I've seen to help them understand what I'm talking about. Like, I get the sense that some patients or people who are inquiring about this, especially from the combat sports world, think I'm trying to sell them on something. And while I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner, I'm a clinic, I have to be able to pay my bills and keep this place open. What I'm trying to sell you on is how vitally important it is to make sure your brain doesn't go to mush,
Mm-hmm.
which you would think is an easy sell, right? But you can't think about that when you're competing. It does you a disservice if you are scared when you're in the ring, when you're competing and someone else is trying to knock you out and you're concerned about that and you're worried about it. You are not going to perform well. You won't be able to get into that flow state. You won't be able to do what you've trained to do. So while trying to navigate those waters so that I don't create some sort of fear in them so that they can compete at their best, I will, I share with them what I've been seeing in the clinic, what kind of brains I've been working with, what kind of problems those people faced, what that history was like, and how things are going for them. And I think, with it being a natural human conversation, it hopefully underscores for them what we're really talking about when we're talking about their brain and their concussions and the sport that they're in. I don't think there's one set way for us to have that discussion or really help the individual themselves really understand what we're talking about. So the examples and the anecdotes, the clinical experience is my way of keeping that real, keeping it genuine, and not being a marketing sales pitch like thing. So they understand that if they really do want to make sure they're doing okay after they're done fighting, they have to take some of these things into account and consideration now.
Yeah. Would you mind sharing any of those specific anecdotes or things that you tell people? I'd love to hear that if you're up for it.
Yeah, some of the most difficult cases I've worked with are the ones I share. So, without getting into the specifics of the person or people, I can say I've worked with several fighters of different ages. Some of them are retired, some of them were youth, some of them were active. So all different levels of different combat sports. And they all were experiencing some level of psychosis and hallucinations, some real mental health struggles. Some of them, that's why they came. Some of them just happened to be something that they shared with me after we started working together. And I helped them understand what their sport history likely how it might have led to some of these problems. So I share with them about, hey, I was working with this boxer and he was telling me that he sometimes struggles to understand what's real, like what reality is. When I asked him, for me, it's somewhat of a challenge to understand what exactly does this person mean? What is that lived experience like? So I
Mhm.
asked and he said, well, for example, in the room we have curtains. He said, I get the sense that there's probably something hiding behind that curtain watching me the entire time and in other places. And even though I think maybe it's not real, it's really hard to know if it's actually there or not. So
Mhm.
there's always that kind of heightened fear or sense of something is lurking, like in my vicinity here. And they can't just tell themselves that's not real. No, whatever. It's it's a level of reality for them that is like at the border of real and unreal, and they can't distinguish that border very clearly anymore. That would be
Mhm.
one of them. Another one which struck me was a very smart, intelligent guy, a great fighter as well. We trained together, and he would have voices in his head. And he said, I know they're not my voices. It's not me talking. I'm not making it up. But it's as though a conversation from a movie or a TV show is happening in my head and I don't have control of it. And I hear it, and the best I can do is just ignore it. And he said, sometimes like when I'm driving in a convertible or some, I don't know if convertibles are in my mind, there's like a convertible or something, but he's like, when I'm driving, it's like, people are in the back seats of the car talking to me the whole time. And it's sometimes hard to focus. And he's like, I can shut them out, but sometimes I can't. I just don't listen. And both of these patients, after experiencing peak mind, going through the process, no more hallucination, no more psychosis. Those were resolved. The brain has, and that's an important thing I think for all these athletes to understand as well, is the brain can heal. Concussion is a treatable injury, but we have to know you have it. You have to come for the treatment, and you have to be consistent with that care. And if you are, you're gonna most likely, not everyone 100%, but most people are going to experience a whole new level of life, quality of life, and performance in their sport and in their work, in their relationships, if they are aware that that thing they're experiencing is a problem. And if it gets assessed by a concussion specialist and they're able to provide that type of treatment, that concussion can be treated. Those symptoms, no matter how crazy they seem, even if the medications didn't work and the psychotherapy didn't work and the other things you've tried didn't work, they likely weren't addressing things in the fashion that was necessary for your brain to get the chance to heal itself. And peak mind has proven itself in these hardest cases to do that. And that's, another reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is like, hey, if we have this thing that works like that, especially in these types of cases, when it's combat sports, these people are still fighting while I'm treating them. And we're still resolving physical problems that their therapists and doctors have been unable to solve. Like, that's something that needs to, get out there more.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And the psychosis part of this is not something that have been exposed to as being a typical side effect of concussion. And I'm wondering have you seen that mostly in your MMA or your combat sport clients, or is that something with your other clients from concussions from other issues?
I see it. That's a good question. Actually, you know what? 3 of the 4 cases that come to the top of my head, those were all combat sports athletes. Another one that immediately comes to my mind when it was a level of like, whoa, your doctor referred you because these psych meds aren't working. Your family is concerned. That was, I think, somewhere between 7 and 9 concussions in 3 different sports, but not combat sports.
Interesting. Okay, that is super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious, you mentioned that you're working with them while they're still actively competing. Is that always how it works for your clients, or do people take a break from the sport to come and get treatment?
Again, it depends because their season doesn't wait. Those who are able to take the time away, those who can't, we do our best to make sure we're staying on top of everything. And what I can say is whether or not they take a break, the fact that they're receiving treatment, they do far better objectively and subjectively than the combat sports athletes who aren't being seen at all. Because I'll get people, case in point, there's several fighters that I work with quite regularly. So I have a collection of their data and I'm able to look at their data, like how are things going in their brain and their autonomic nervous system, these other batteries of tests when they've been in training and sparring more heavily. What does it look like as their workload is lower? What does it look like as we ramp up in camp for a fight? What does it look like after a fight? So I have pictures in time of performance across multiple professional fighters. And then I will get some of their training partners or someone else from another gym come in just looking for treatment, maybe orthopedic work or just baseline for their brain. And they'll come in. One example comes to mind is they were just sparring the day before. And I said, oh, how you feeling? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, I feel fine. So I go through the list of symptoms real quick. No symptoms, blah, blah, blah. And they're coming in for orthopedic work, but I know the sport. I know they're just sparring. We're going to see something. So I said, hey, let me just do a quick scan of your pupil. So I use Reflex Pro, our pupillometry, right? Which scans, for those who don't know, it will shine a light in the eye. It scans the pupil's response to that light. That is a reflex that's managed by the brain and the autonomic nervous system. This company has developed an app that allows us to compare the performance of that pupil to normative data and say, hey, for your age and your sex, your pupil's not quite responding the way it should. In fact, maybe it's performing as though it's concussed, and it will give us scores. If the score is within a certain range, it'll give us a yellow, which tells us that person's performing as though they're concussed. Maybe they're not exactly concussed, but the nervous system is functioning as though it is, which is not a good thing. Warnings that say, I forget what exactly the red one is, but I've seen reds come up and it says like neurological injury suspected. I've treated patients, like some of the cases I was talking about, they were still training and fighting while we were treating them. They would come in from their sparring sessions and I'd get that red and it would say neurological injury suspected. And that's just from sparring. That's just preparation for a fight. That's not the fight itself. And that was multiple times in the time that we were working together. It would clear up immediately with treatment. And again, their symptoms would resolve and be okay afterwards. But this person I scanned just from regular sparring who said they had no symptoms, both sides of their nervous system, the left and the right, their score was in that yellow realm saying this patient is basically functionally concussed. They have no idea. Who knows when that happened during the sparring session? If that was towards the beginning, they probably competed for another 20, 30 minutes, taking additional damage to a brain that was already in some additional danger, right? And they had no clue. There were no signs or symptoms for them the day after. And so treatment, whether it be during actual sparring and training for a fight, is better than no treatment at all from what I do and with the data I have. So I don't force them to stop. I encourage it. But if we're going to do what we got to do, and you're going to be better off with me and with this than if you don't have anything and have these other things that these other people have been trying that's just not helping. The physical therapy, the massage, and dealing just with the musculoskeletal pain and aches, it is not really what you should be concerned with. So I guess it's how I'd answer your question.
Yeah, thank you. It's just as you're talking about that, I'm as a mom and I don't like combat sports are not something that I am naturally driven to participate in. So it's like for me, I'm just listening to this. I'm like, why are we doing this, guys? Like, what is the driver here? But I know I get it. I know that it is such an important part of people's identity. There are really amazing, wonderful things that come from sport and these kinds of activities. And so I understand that side. I just am like, oh man, your brain is worth protecting. And that's part of the thing that, drove me to reach out to you is I know this client of mine really, really, really wants to get back. And he doesn't feel like he can right now. And he was just like wrestling around with some friends and started getting symptoms again. And the doctor made a comment like, oh, I don't know if you should go back to this at all. And that was really, really hard for him mentally, emotionally. And, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, why are we doing it? Is it worth doing it? Like, why are we doing it? And then also if the pros in people's minds, as they're comparing pros and cons, if the pros are just so strong that they're not going to stop, what's the best way to allow yourself to do it? Or like, yeah, what are your thoughts on all of this?
This is like the same conversation I think we had in October. It's on our little hike. I
Yeah.
think there's multiple answers. I think everyone has to determine this for themselves, but I'll give you my thoughts on it. You don't understand the drive to compete in combat sports until you've actually done it. It doesn't make sense. I can't explain it to you. I didn't join combat sports and start competing in kickboxing because I wanted to beat the shit out of somebody. I joined it initially because I had a slight background in it. It was around me in my world growing up. My brother, was in martial arts. He taught me a little bit, mostly like how to be a punching bag and how to, get choked out and experience what that feels like, that kind of stuff. But I learned some self-defense, and it was always an interest of mine because I looked up at my big brother. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, he does all this really cool stuff and he can protect himself. So when I was in Japan, gyms were kicking me out because of my tattoos. So I joined multiple gyms, or tried to, and wasn't accepted. So it was a kickboxing gym that welcomed me in. They didn't care. Everyone had ink. So my introduction to it was already one that I would say is there wasn't a huge, deep interest in it. But as I started training and started sparring with friends and started moving around, bro, like, it's such a level of challenge. It is like the development of self that must come to make sure you aren't going to be in danger just when you're practicing is a level of focus, determination, self-power and self-will and confidence that is cultivated in that space with those people who are trying to, knock your block off, but you're all supporting each other. And like, there's a real community and love, a closeness that gets built in these spaces that is not like anything I felt in any other sport. And it's not a team sport, but man, you've got to have a whole team of people behind you. And that, I think, is something that the parents who bring their children into combat sports, that's what they want for their kids. Like, I can put them in this place where hopefully if they have a gym and an instructor, that the kids can be safe. They're going to learn things that will keep them safe on the streets. They can protect themselves at school if there's a problem, develop these tight friendships. They learn how to move their body. They'll be stronger. They'll be healthier. There's all the same things you get out of sport, but it just happens to be that this parent, that's where they gained it from. And I think in a very, very unique way that most people, anyone who hasn't competed in combat sports, won't fully understand. So the first thing I would say is the families, it's oftentimes a family affair. The families that engage in combat sports or bring their kids in combat sports are likely not going to stop. And I understand that drive, that love of the sport. I'll never stop wanting to compete and fight and train. I just have to, be mindful of it, and I don't spar anymore. So that's the first thing. The second thing is then, okay, if you're not going to stop, and if you want your youth or yourself to perform well throughout this career in this sport of choice, and you want your life to be okay afterwards, then we've got to be serious and have this conversation about what it means for your brain's performance and your brain's health. And then understanding what that means. It means we start tracking that sucker from the beginning. We have a baseline. We work with a concussion specialist. We work with, someone like Jack, who not only understands concussion maybe, but goes a bit deeper and even understands the sport. Because these parents, they stop taking their kids to the doctors because the doctors tell them to stop competing. I've had parents tell me the doctors won't even see their kids anymore. So these kids no longer even receive medical care because the system doesn't think that it can effectively help these children when they're exposed to this sport, which in the end likely isn't creating too much more exposure rates to concussion at the beginning than any other sport they might be competing in, honestly. But things have to be managed much better. We have to be really on point with these things and make sure lifestyle's in check as well as anything else. So if you're considering combat sports, keep that in mind. If you're already in it, you need to be doing that. And I know that if you're already in it or your family's in it, you're not going to stop. Totally cool. You should compete in the thing you love. And if you can make a career out of it, fill your bags while you can. But, make sure you're putting some time and money and effort into making sure that your cognitive longevity and your brain's performance isn't taking unnecessary hits. And that comes with working with a professional, with a concussion specialist, and being proactive about your brain's health overall. So that's how I think we can make combat sports a safer option for those who choose to participate.
Okay. So yeah, just like continuing getting the help while you're in it. Would you recommend that people, that there's not a seasonality to it, it's like all the time? Would you recommend that people take intentional breaks from it, to like, whether it's just like proactive, like I'm just going to take these months off, give myself a break and just like let whatever healing needs to happen, or is it, or like I've been injured, I'm going to take a break for this long? Like I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Would you recommend?
Good question. What I have told my combat sports athletes to do, and what I try to tell them, even though because they're always competing, always training, and I think that message gets lost, is at the very least, after a fight, don't go back to sparring the first month. Like, I know you might not be working with me regularly to get a baseline. You might not be checking in on your brain as much as you should be, but do your road work. like keep your cardio up, because they already have a routine of doing strength and conditioning. So the conditioning side is that cardio. We know that cardio rehab, a sub-threshold cardio rehab that's, staggered in the appropriate way based on heart rate, that's a perfect way. That is a evidence-based way and an excellent way for that brain to recover from whatever trauma may have happened during the fight. And leading up to the fight, there was definitely probably more sparring than usual. There was more risk being taken than usual. So at some point in the camp leading up to the fight or during the fight itself, there was likely some injury there that will benefit from cardio rehab. So do your strength and conditioning, probably more so focus on the conditioning aspect. Take a month off from sparring. I'll even coach some of the guys, when you're hitting the bag, be aware of how you feel when you hit it. Like, are you getting more fatigued than usual? Are you feeling like foggy? Are you really, really tired after the fact? You get really irritable? What are you noticing that's not normal right now? And bring that back to me. If you're experiencing those issues, let's find a way for you to train to hit that bag without it being a problem. And if you aren't experiencing symptoms when hitting the bag, cool. That will just be another layer of activity you can do while you're in the gym without actually like engaging with your friends in the gym the way you normally would, which is punching and kicking and rolling with them. You guys can still talk and hang out. You can still be in that space and be active with them. But the way we're active, we have to be very mindful of it. So yeah, if we can take a month off at the very least after a fight, but be intentional about what we're doing to recover, that would be great. If you have a period in time of life where you're able to take a slightly longer break and actually get treatment, that would also be recommended. Probably once a year at least, right?
Okay. That's good to know and good to hear. And just like, yeah, let that be in your brains, friends who are listening, especially parents of kiddos who are doing this. So I think that makes sense to me. I feel like, yeah, if it's such a meaningful part of life that it's not something they're willing to give up, then I think that actively engaging in recovery things throughout the year, and if you can take breaks from it so that you can do that and like get that treatment on a regular basis, I think that sounds like it makes sense to me as a good approach to allow continued participation as much as possible, but still taking into account that brain health that is so important. And I think you brought up a good point too, and I just want to like highlight the fact that a big motivator for this, and I know that's true for my client, is the self-protection piece. Like people want to know that they can defend themselves, and this is a very good way of learning that skill. So yeah, I think that's important. And I'm curious, do you do work with people virtually? If there were somebody that was not in Hawaii, could they talk with you and get benefit from what you're doing?
Yeah, there's definitely, ways we can support them more along the lines of like a coaching role, like we'll say concussion coach role, basically kind of thing. Especially when it comes to combat sports, I think that's where it would make most sense, because there is a lot of input I can provide, a lot of like real life expertise I have that will allow us to find ways for them to continue to train while recovering. If they're in like a recovery state or they're like experiencing issues that they're unable to overcome, a lot of things we can do to help them without there being the assessment, diagnosis, prescription component, which I can't do via telehealth. That would be out of my scope of practice. But there's lots of things we can guide them on based on my experience, based on like their gym scenario and setup or their environment, what the current issues are, and provide a structured guideline for what training should look like, what recovery should look like, what lifestyle should look like if we're going to be competing in this sport. I mentioned earlier about the curriculum I'm creating for my members, and that's because, like I said, every brain needs the same thing when it comes to its lifestyle and the inputs it receives. When we're talking about this type of sport, it just needs to be really on point, much more intentional, much more consistent than I think the general public. So those are all things we can help support through telehealth, through some sort of hybrid program. And a lot of the baseline apps and the things I think they should be using, we can give them access to. So yeah, we can give you a baseline. We can check those autonomics and have that data so that if you're injured, if you're concerned you've been injured, we compare it to the baseline and we can now coach you through some problems if we need to. So yes, I would happily work with people via telehealth when it comes to combat sports athletes in particular. So just reach out. The easiest way probably to find me is on Instapuncture HI for Hawaii. So Jackupuncture HI, DM me. We can talk about things. I can give you my email if there's a longer chat to be had, or my phone number. And yeah, people are more than welcome to, if they're going to compete in combat sports, please reach out to me or someone else who specializes in it, especially from the concussion side of things, the brain performance side of things.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for putting that in. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. And I think it's so cool to have, yeah, everybody's got their niche, right? Like, and I think it's so helpful to know that you're there, you're a resource for people who are in this space specifically, who are interested in continuing to practice this sport, and to have somebody who knows the sport from personal experience and the injury from personal experience and is just so like well versed in all this. I just think that's great. I'm grateful that you're going to be a good resource for people out there. Is there anything else that you want to have people know about you or the sport or what's happening in this realm that we haven't addressed yet?
Well, you mentioned the parents of combat sports youth a couple of times, or, the parents who are listening. I think it might be important for them to understand if they're going to have their child compete or participate in combat sports, or something they want for their kids, that it's likely going to be best to do it from a place of knowledge, education, and confidence. The knowledge and education meaning we understand the risks. We understand how to lower those risks. We understand the steps that should be taken if the unfortunate but likely inevitable concussion or injury to the brain does happen. We are going to be working with a professional or a provider, who is familiar with the sport and these types of injuries, the concussion recovery in particular. That way, you're not left without a plan when that concussion does happen, and you don't allow for your child to continue training and competing while concussed because you missed the signs, because you didn't understand what to be looking for, and you didn't have a baseline, and you weren't like regularly assessing for these things. So I don't want parents to fear combat sports. I don't want the athletes to fear combat sports. It is a sport just like any other. It just means that we have to be, I'll say it again, we have to be much more intentional and consistent and proactive about our brain's performance, because that is directly related to our brain's health, and its decline is going to continue to impact you for the entirety of your life until you actually start addressing it. So be proactive so that you have the best sports career possible, you have the best health as possible, and the greatest quality of life throughout your life, whether it be in sport and after sport or not. So I don't want parents to be afraid. I don't want them to say, oh, there's this huge risk in combat sports that doesn't exist in other sports. No, in ball, court and ball sports, right? All these other sports, they're just at as high of a risk for the most part. The combat sports world is just unique that there's no breaks. There's always going to be some sort of competition. There'll always be a chance for that injury to occur. So we just have to be aware of that. We have to know what to do about it. But let the kids enjoy it and play and see what they gravitate towards. Maybe after trying it, they're like, oh, this is too hard. Like, let me play basketball or whatever it is. So that would be my message to the parents. Don't take fear away from this message, from this talk. That's not what it's about whatsoever. It's about helping people understand what needs to be done so we can participate intelligently and successfully in combat sports.
I think that's well said. I appreciate you putting that out there. I do think that's an important message. Thank you so much for all of this. I do think that was a really important message to the parents, for them to feel and know that this can be such a passionate thing for families and for individuals, and such an important part of life. And so if this is something that people are engaging in, just to be wise about it, be intentional about it, and get educated on what you need to know to recognize signs and to take as best care of your body and brain as possible. Just really well said. And I appreciate this. I'm excited to share this with my client and his mom. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And I'm excited to see all the future things. Wait, hold on. One more thing. I think when we talked, we got to go on a hike together in Nanaimo when we went and hung out with Natasha in a Concussion Nerds thing. So when we did that, I think you were talking about possibly doing stuff with the schools. Is that still something that you're doing? What is the message that you give to
Yeah,
the...
so I volunteer at a local high school, Lelehua High School, Go Mules. I've been doing that for 2 years now. The work I do there is it's volunteer. My goal is to be screening for concussions, helping the youth recover, guide them to care. The school also has its own efforts in doing that. I'm just an additional resource. I go in every other week. So that's continuing. The foundation I talked about, that nonprofit, that's going to be our way of reaching all of the athletes beyond where I'm volunteering. So yes, that's coming online. I'm actually working with a coach at another local high school just down the road from our clinic, who may be another avenue by which I am supporting another school. So that's what I'm doing here with the schools at the moment. And I hope, if there are any local schools or fight teams or combat sports gyms that hear this and want to work with me, we could find a way of making sure that we're keeping these athletes safe and competing well and at the highest level possible while making sure their brains are on point. But there's, nothing hugely new there. Those programs are continuing to fruit and grow.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love, again, that you're doing this and helping kids have the best possible potential outcomes going forward and getting the help that they need. So thanks for being here. Thanks for what you're doing. You're awesome. And I'm sure we will continue to stay in touch. So thanks so much, Jack.
Excellent. Thank you, Bethany.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.